Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. Everybody, welcome back. We just had our countdown to start, and it was like, are you starting or am I starting? Oh, no.
At least here we are. We have a countdown. We started, if you guys are watching the video, you have probably seen that our video looks a little bit different. We're using a new platform to record on, and so we get to experience practicing with something new. And so now we get like a 5-second countdown from the time we push record until it records.
Right. So good. Okay. Well, in all of our prepping, Josh came up with a fun topic, and I don't know what it is. So, Josh, you want to tell us about it?
Yeah. We've talked a bit about this before, or we at least touched around the idea. But I was processing bridge building with somebody else the other day. And if you've listened to this podcast before, or you've listened to any of the load sharing conversations we had, you know that bridge building is like a big thing to us, like connecting communities, connecting people, whatever that looks like. But really that's a big thing for us, is being able to do that. And I had this, I was having this conversation with Francois, who some of you guys will know. And we were talking about bridge building and talking about like, well, how do we get to the other side of the bridge? Like, how do we connect with the new thing? And we were specifically talking about innovation. And so within innovation, you see where you're going, you see what needs to happen, but how do you quite get there? And I had this realization that part of bridge building means you're actually connected to both sides. You're connected to the old and the new side. And that was like a big realization in my mind, because Kim and I have both been really passionate about cryptocurrency, and we've had a lot of conversations on, well, how do you move the ball forward in a large way that pushes more of the general public into Bitcoin? And in my mind, one of the best ways to do that is just to leave the old system and start walking towards the new system. And although I do think that's part of it, you first have to be connected to the old system so that people can get onto the new system. And that was such a, it just hit me. And I was like, oh man, I've been trying to get to the new system and totally abandoning the old system, which isn't bridge building, because it doesn't leave any path available for people to follow. And that just really hit me hard one day. And so I wanted to bring that to you and kind of see what your thoughts were with that.
Well, I tend to agree. I think we've talked so much about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and really ushering in this different financial system. Mm-hmm. But we've talked a lot about like running on parallel systems. Mm-hmm. But with parallel systems, there won't be any cross points. So you have to build the bridges, right? Because there has to be an on-ramp and an off-ramp. And I think that's what we're talking about with building the bridges, but you do have to be connected to both. And I think that is super insightful and really important, because as people who really get excited about innovation and what's next, it would be really easy to just be like, okay, let's cut that off and let's just move to the other. But if you do that, then you're going to be the only people operating there, unless others are on their own also cutting off the old system and going to the new system, which is, I think, fairly unlikely for the mass majority of people.
Right.
So, yeah, you're going to have to build a bridge. And as much as I would have liked to have been able to cut off one and simply operate in the other, it's just not practical in this world right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we do need both systems running, and we do need both usable, and we do need those on and off ramps to be able to operate in both. But we've talked about bridge building, not even just in like the financial systems and stuff. We've talked about it. We're so connected with some communities, like in South Africa and everything, and truly have a heart for seeing those towns, those regions, that country, and even that continent um, have like invigorated life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to see them thriving. And I think that doesn't have to mean that we don't want to see that in our own communities here too. But I think that's what we're doing, is we're kind of trying to build this bridge and have the ability to be in both, and be investing in both, and want to see both thriving, and want to show other people that, wow, there's really some big life that's happening in these other places, but I think that's really part of the bridge. Is it's not abandoning the old.
Mm-hmm.
It's simply providing the way to get to the new as well.
Yeah, that's such a it would just hit me so hard when I had that realization, because I was like, oh man, like there's part of me that just wants to be like the trailblazer and go exploring and find the new thing. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like the world needs those people to go exploring, to go find it, to go trial and error it, to go play around. Like the world needs that. But for the general public to shift society, you have to get the general population to follow, to step into that.
Mhm.
And in order to do that, it has to make sense, and it has to be like a clear path. And so one of the things we were talking about before we started recording was just like in politics. And it was like, man, I know politics can be better than the way we've experienced it. But does that look like totally abandoning what it is to create something? Well, no, that's like anarchy. Like that, and
Right.
that's not what we like. I don't support that. I don't think you support that.
Nope.
We
I'm
want,
actually very for government,
yeah.
just outworked in a certain way. Like, I don't think that anarchy is the way. I don't think that non-government is
Hmm.
actually going to serve any of us well.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that at some point people will get to the point where they can self-govern well
Mm.
enough that government, like the formalized government, doesn't have to be as big. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we're there. I think
Yeah.
ideally that would be great, but I don't have any like false pretenses that
Yeah.
this is happening right this minute.
Well, and part of that is that it is that bridge building where people who are in one system can see the path to the new one.
Mhm.
You can build a parallel system, and which is something we've talked a lot about, and you can see the other system, but maybe you have no idea how to access it. And I think that's like my mind is like, okay, I got to refocus my mind from simply focusing on the parallel system to focusing on how to connect them. So you got to like be in one of them enough that people can see the connection, but be different enough that they can see, oh, he's actually operating in this other place, and that looks appealing. You got to make it worth it for people to want to change. And I'm specifically in the moment thinking about like religion and faith. And it's like I've done this, and many other people who identify as Christian mystics are like, "Oh, I'm so fed up with the church. I don't want anything to do with the way I have seen Christianity be um, be outworked, and so I'm just going to totally abandon it and come over to this other system. Well, then all those people who were with you, they see where you are and they see that it's a real thing, but they don't know how to connect with you because there's no clear path between the two. And like I have found myself lately, and we've talked about this on the podcast too, but like I found myself lately like wanting to hold that identification as a Christian because like I believe from where I'm standing that I've seen a bigger picture of what that means than what I used to. And I don't want to abandon the title of being a Christ follower just because other people who also identify as that are outworking it in a way that I don't enjoy. Like, why don't I fight for that title and they have to find a different title? Like, that's sort of like, in my mind, it's a little bit of that, um, return to the one system, return to the original system so that I can make a path to the new one instead of just, oh, I went out exploring and this is what I found and it's great. And you should also go exploring and find it too. Like, why don't I help people make that transition? Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's something I've been thinking about for a couple weeks of like, what does that really look like to be a bridge builder? What does it really look like to be connected to both systems, but not be tied to the system that you're trying to innovate from?
Yeah. I am also thinking about, we use this analogy all the time, the going up the mountain and coming down the mountain. There's a whole episode of it recently.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was called. Go up, come down or something. But I think about, there are times when the Lord is really wanting to teach you something different or to reform how you perceive something or operate with something or think about something. And so there will be a clear like calling and drawing out and away from it. And I kind of see that as the bridge being built. So if you were to start building a bridge and then just continually like build the bridge and then go back to the original side and then build a little more and go back to the original side, it would be a very slow process. And you might actually start losing the drive to continue like building the bridge to make the connection. And I think that is going up the mountain. And there's some things that we have to leave behind when we do that. And it's that old system that you're kind of leaving behind. But then once you get to the top of the mountain, or once you actually connect the bridge from one side to the other, then there's an ability to go back and to see it from a different perspective. Because I will tell you, looking from the new side of the bridge that's just been connected back to the old system looks way different than only knowing the old system and looking towards something else. And then some of those things that might have disgusted you or might have really even caused trauma or just were displeasing, you might be seeing them from a different angle now and a different perspective and starting to see some of the value there. But the bridge is built. And so you can go back there and you can operate with this new perspective and this new knowledge of this other system that is there. And there are other ways. There are new ways. There are efficient ways. There are simply different perspectives. But you can still operate in that other while still helping people over and across the bridge. And I think that's really important. And I've gone through those where I'm building the bridge and I don't need to be looking back, and it feels like almost complete annihilation, like just burn the bridge behind me, except that I'm not actually called to be a bridge burner at all.
Right.
Not at this point. I'm a bridge builder. And I know that it is to help people see things from different perspectives. And I think both of us are like that, Josh. And I think it's fun even that you are a Joshua. And in the Bible, Joshua did this. Like he crossed Okay, he literally crossed the river to get to the promised land.
Right.
And then had to come back and help people do that too. That was building a bridge, right? He was a trailblazer, but he built the bridge. He didn't just go blaze the trail and stay there and hope that everybody else saw that he left and would find their way too.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really important. We've talked about this with traditional church. Like, there's a time it's like, we don't want anything to do with it. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I actually have a real desire to get back to that community, to really get back into that system and see it from this other perspective. But some of it had to be stripped away first.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, I think about, there's a guy named Christopher Carter, that taught on the changing of the age a lot. And he also, he taught on a lot of things, but that was a big thing he taught on. And he would teach that, like, yeah, if you just look at the cosmic clock that is the stars, we are literally shifting from one constellation being the major constellation to another constellation being the major constellation. And he was never like the type of person that, like, oh, you're stuck in whatever that is that has authority over you, but also, like, there is a level of truth to, like, hey, pay attention to what's going on around you. But one thing that he would teach on is that there's 3 types of people when there's something major in the cosmos shifting. There's the people who their role is to stay in what was there and close it out as best as they possibly can. Then there's the role of the people who stand in the doorway and usher people into the new. And then there's the role of the people who run into the new, never looking back, to explore the new so that they can, like, so when people get there, they can be like, oh, hey, this is what's here. Like, and I love that, like, description of, like, the 3 roles. And for a long time, I identified myself as someone who ran into the new and never looked back. And I think there's truth in it, but just like you said, there's been a desire to go back to connect with what was there. And I think that's the bridge building part. Like, I think we experience this, like, pioneering, let's go explore, let's go find out what's here. And then there is a returning to the old so that you can connect both. And that is the bridge building. So it's like, oh, like, I've always been the person in the middle, but I first had to be the person who ran into the new so that I could go back to be the one who ushered them in. And I was like, that's, like, really, it's like it was a cool self-realization for me. And I think it could be a good, it can be a good thing for, like, the listeners to sit and be like, okay, where am I in that process? Like, am I securely in what was, and my goal is, or my role is, to really finish this as excellently as possible? There's nothing wrong with that. I think it can be easy to be in that position and look at the people who are moving to something different and be like, oh man, I wish I could do that. And it could be easy to be the people running into the new and being, how come there's people stuck in the old? But it's like, you got to know your destiny. You got to know your purpose, because if your purpose is to close out the old and you're trying to do something you're not supposed to, or if your purpose is to run into the new, but you're constantly putting down the people who are in the old, like, neither one of them is going to be very helpful.
Right. I think I also had inklings of being like the Trailblazer. I don't know what is the title of, were there names for that? I don't know.
Call it. He didn't ever give a name.
The, like, never looking back thing. But I don't think that's what it is. I think I go with that so I can see the old, so that I can come back and build a bridge. I've just, like, okay, Josh, even with when we have engaged over who we are as this podcast, as partners in this business, like, we have gotten some very specific words from the Lord about who we are, but one of those is connectors.
Right.
How is that not the bridge builders?
Yeah, that's
You
very
know,
much so is.
whether between people or locations or concepts, whatever, right? I think that is continually kind of revealing itself in us and our role and what we do. I guess I had never really thought so in depth about it in regards to the bridge building, even though it's something we talk about all the time. Like when we talk about that other project that we're a part of in South Africa, when I get passionate and I tell people about it, it's always about the bridge.
Mm.
You know, like I can't help but talk about how we're building bridges between places, between things, between concepts, between people groups, systems, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, but it pours out of me. And I haven't really dug into it, but you know what? I think it's because we're connectors.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an interesting thing because it hit me in this spot of like, man, I need to reevaluate where I've been or what my mindset, because I think maybe I needed to be the person who ran into the new for a minute. But if I'm called to be a connector, which we know this podcast is called to be a connector, then we
Right.
also have to connect. We also have to be in both places.
Right. I think there is the running forward.
Mm.
There's the running forward without completely disconnecting from the old. And when you were first talking about this, I was thinking about the concept of like burning bridges. And I just personally, throughout my life, I have always been very aware and very intentional about not allowing bridges to be burned relationally.
Mm.
So if I am working in a job, I'm going to leave well. I don't want to burn bridges, and I don't want to leave a bad taste in someone's mouth so that there can never be a connection there again.
Right.
I find those connections to be really valuable. Unless for some reason something happens and the Lord's like, cut it off, then I mean, setting that thing ablaze. But
Right.
that's being very led. You know, but I find myself doing this naturally. But I think, at least in this moment, and I don't know why I hadn't realized it before, I think just part of my identity is being revealed in some of this, you know? Like there's inklings and tendencies that have been there all along, but all of a sudden it's like, no. Like when I say connector, I mean you're literally building bridges between things and allowing things to flow, which is it. I mean, that feels pretty special to me.
Yeah.
But this is just me receiving it right now. And so I'm very like in the now.
I think it is a really important role. Like, what an honor to have that role where you get to invite people into the promised land, into the new.
Right. Into the new. Yeah. And you get to be the ones who it's like you get the preview. You get to go to the premiere, and then you get to write all the reviews and show everybody how great it is and bring them along with you. Like it's kind of the best of both worlds, in my opinion, because it fits me, I suppose.
Right.
You know, but there's so much value in all of that, you know, in being able to stay in what is established and make sure that everything gets closed out properly, you know, and that things are still running there, because if there's a clog there, you're never going to get to the bridge.
Right.
And then those who are preparing the new place and who are willing to go out front and blaze the trail, because it's not the most pleasant thing when you're in the wilderness and having to make a way.
Right. Yeah. It's very uncomfortable.
Right. But rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. I like it. Good stuff.
Good stuff. I wonder, to people listening, I mean, to the people who are listening, have you ever thought of this before? I doubt that this is a new concept. And where do you fit in that? Or is there a fourth category that we've missed?
Yeah.
Is there something we've completely overlooked? I would love to hear that too.
Yeah. Let us know. Leave a comment. Reach out. We'd love to have that conversation.
For sure. Okay. Well, until then, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.